We have an awesome session right now with world famous Emmanuel Gadaix, EMX. For those guys that don't know who EMX is, right? He's a SVC member, so that should tell you a lot. Like Security Vacation Club, right, was something that was formed like years and years and years ago. And EMX, I think, has been around since, for at least speaking Hang in the Box, since like 2003, 2004. He's been at 2007. He was in Amsterdam. He was in Dubai multiple times. He's spoken in Kuala Lumpur. He did a presentation with the GRUC, in fact, about OPSEC. And yeah, so, Emmanuel, can you hear me, bro?
Yeah, I can hear you. Great, man.
Nice to see you, man.
The old days.
How are you, bro?
Yeah, you were talking about all those old conferences, and it feels like it's a lifetime ago, doesn't it? I mean,
yeah, it does, man.
Being able to be in a crowd with people, you know.
Where are you now, man? Where are you at these days, man?
Well, today I'm in Geneva, in Switzerland, which is where I spend half of my life now. It's a great place: mountains, lakes, tunnels.
Can't complain.
I hope that you guys are going to come to Europe soon and organize some crazy party because we all miss it, man.
Fingers crossed, bro. I mean, we've been planning for coming back since like last year, pretty much, right? We've been saying like, okay, maybe the next conference we can do it live, right? And then like, no, we can't. And we've been saying that since February last year, pretty much. Like Amsterdam came and went, Singapore came and went, Cyber Week last year came and went, this year's Amsterdam came and went. We're still in Singapore now, it's still virtual, but we still have Cyber Week, bro. The last one of this year. Hopefully we can get back to in person, man. But we're missing it, man. We miss hanging out and drinking and doing crazy stuff, man. Like, this is not fun.
This is not fun, and I have a feeling that the security community is changing, and by not being able to organize conferences and meeting people and networking, and that somehow we don't participate in that chain, and that's all wrong, because it means all the big players, the big companies are going to be dominating the field soon, and that doesn't feel right.
It doesn't feel right, man. But it's because the hallway track, right? I mean, we all know, like, we go for a conference, none of us watch the talks, right? Let's be honest, right? None of us go into the tracks. We're like chilling out outside, walking around, smoking a cigarette, right? And it's the people that you bump into during those conversations, like, hey, I haven't seen you for ages, like, meet so and so. And those interactions, you just can't virtualize that, man. Like, no amount of studio, Zoom, blah, blah, blah is going to change that, human interaction.
Absolutely. And I think the HITB conferences, they played a larger role than, just being a place where you indeed listen to talks, because you were the voice of the community. I mean, those conferences were the voice of the community. And now that community is largely silent, and this can't go on for too long. We need that, we need those young guys having new ideas on the scene. We need to see innovative solutions. We need to keep that community alive. And this has been your mission ever since you started HITB. So this must be a terrible time for you guys. I mean, I can't even understand how you guys are still standing. I mean, I really applaud what you're doing at the moment, because
Thank you, bro. Thank you. I mean, it's like, it's disheartening, I mean, when we first started Hack in the Box, I mean, the main reason why we started is because we couldn't afford to go to Black Hat, right? I mean, that was the main thing. It was super expensive, and we were like, hey, why don't we bring the cool speakers over to Asia and hang out with them here? And that intent has always been the same, as in, we organize the conferences in Amsterdam, in Dubai, whatever, but it's always about, bringing, our friends together, hanging out, chilling out, catching up, and man, this virtual thing just sucks, bro. It's just not the same, man. What can I say?
No, but maybe it's a time for reflection. I think a lot of people, they're locked down in their house, and they're thinking, what am I going to do with my life and all that. And to some extent, this is what's happening to the industry, including, yours, mine. So it's time for reflection. So, looking back at all those years, I'm curious, as someone who's been really on the front lines like you have, how do you feel the industry has changed? I mean, what's the difference between, the first few HITB conferences and, what you've been doing recently?
Hey, I'm the host, bro. I'm the host. I ask the questions.
Okay. Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Fair question. I mean, you and I have been friends for God knows how long, man. Like way long, right? And we've seen so much change, right? I mean, the community in itself, like even in Malaysia, we've had folks like Miling Mudin has become like super corporate. Spoonfork. I don't know whether you still remember Spoonfork and SK Chong, right? Yeah. Those are like the old school guys, right? And they were like the hardcore technical hackers, like Malaysia, like Malaysian hackers by Malaysians, right? And then those guys became corporate, and then they moved on, and as we've progressed over the years, it's kind of like, I feel like the community has gotten kind of like a little bit smaller in the sense that everybody else that's doing all the new stuff, it's not that exciting, you know what I mean? We don't see the major vulnerability breakthroughs, like the new techniques. I was talking to Greg just a while ago, right? And like he was like in 2003, 2004, he was talking about the fisting technique, right? Like to hide files in unallocated ioctals, I think it was at that point in time, right? Like in the unallocated file space, hiding stuff inside that. So the anti-forensics techniques, right? Like those are groundbreaking techniques, but we don't see those today, right? We see some new vuln XSS, some new ODE that is like it's probably patched already because responsible disclosure or coordinated disclosure. It's not the same, bro. Like we don't have that excitement of Gaius coming around and like, hey, check this cool stuff out. Remember those days? Like those were cool days, man.
Yeah, but I think this is, to some extent, those discoveries and this research still happens, but because of the way the industry has evolved, this is not happening in public anymore. If you go back to let's go back to the 90s, before that it was prehistory. I don't think it's as much that people could relate to. But in the 90s, there was the growth of hacking and the hacking scene in general. And if you look at the defense versus the offense, the red team versus the blue team, as we would say today, you could see that the bad guys or the hackers, it was the best time for them to play around because the other side didn't have a clue. And you can't really blame them for not having a clue because the management didn't think there was a problem. So you had guys that were supposed to defend corporate infrastructure or even national infrastructures, and they had no clue, no experience, no deep knowledge, no serious tools. The management wasn't interested. There was no real high-profile cases, and the monetary losses were minimal. Fast forward a decade, and you've got a lot of media exposure. You've got high-profile hacks. You've got more and more researchers coming into the field, and suddenly security is on everyone's radar, including the management. But if you continue, the fact that hacking become more difficult from the technical point of view means the exploits are becoming more sophisticated, and then some companies say, "Oh, okay, maybe we can monetize this exploit stuff." I don't know if you guys remember. What was it called, that company? iDefense or something like that?
Yep.
They were buying exploits at $50 a pop or something. Yeah. But, eventually people say, oh, wow, those exploits could be sold for a lot more, and I could maybe sell them to governments or to, Russian malware groups and whatnot. And suddenly, you monetize something that was mostly a community effort before. You monetize the development of exploits. So that's why you don't see them anymore. It's not that they're not there. I'm regularly seeing lists of 0 days that Greg and others circulate. And man, there are some very sophisticated stuff out there. It's just that the $1 million price tag sort of, slows down the adoption of such techniques in public. So I'm not sure this is actually a good development because the whole 0 days exploit development and vulnerability research has basically become a commercial enterprise, and the prices are so high now that, only nation-state actors can actually afford them, or possibly the large criminal groups in Russia. So this is where we are now.
Oh, Bitcoin hoarders, bro. If you got a lot of Bitcoin, you can buy a lot of exploits, man. Because if you had like 1,000 Bitcoin from way back when, right? It's like today you'll be able to buy almost anything, man. So yeah.
Yeah. Why isn't someone doing it? Well, maybe someone is.
Maybe someone is, right? That's the thing. Just because you don't hear about it doesn't mean it's not happening. But do you remember, way back in, I think 2007 probably, like Wabi Sabi Labi, right? Like Roberto Priatoni did that exploit marketplace, and everybody went ape shit, bro. Do you remember they were like, no, you cannot sell exploits, you cannot put weaponized stuff, how can you be auctioning these things to the highest bidder, blah, blah, blah. And then fast forward, like, 2021, right? There's like Bow Bounty, there's HackerOne, there's like various different programs you can like sign up for, and now it's normalized, right? Like, no big deal. But Wabi Sabi Labi, like, was kind of like ahead of its time, I suppose, right? But that was much better. As in, it was like, the market pays what it can afford, not what the seller decides it should be worth, you know what I mean? And then you create this price disparity.
It was a great model, and that Italian guy who started that is really cool, so I'm not sure why he got all that grief at the time. But yeah, the industry the mentality has definitely changed. And another thing that we've seen in our job is that, as I said before, in the 90s or even the decade that followed, the side that is defending infrastructure and corporate entities, they don't have the right tools. They're not prepared to defend against sophisticated attackers, APTs and nation states, etc. But, in the last few years, we've seen that the EDR industry, they really upped their game. And now, I think for the first time since we've been doing that, that red teaming job and evaluating infrastructure, security and all that, for the first time we're seeing tools that are actually useful, because before, they had their fancy firewalls, their IDS, their whatever stateful inspection crap. It never made any difference. Those were just toys that were sold to those corporations that gives them a feel-good security, but it never made any difference to a sophisticated attacker. However, nowadays the EDRs, they have reached a level of sophistication, and especially we're seeing them deployed on Linux machine, on Unix, Solaris, etc. They were not before. It was only focusing on Windows. So the game is sort of changing in that respect, and that the sophisticated attackers nowadays, they have to not only face, security admins are a lot more clued than before because of the level of education and training, and all the information they can get. So not only the admins are a lot better, but the weapons that they have are very, very sophisticated, and that is changing the landscape. This is for us in the last 3 years, we've seen that as a very focused development effort from the EDR companies, that suddenly they're starting to have tools that are usable. I'm not sure what that means for the, all these APT groups, etc. But I have a feeling that the window of opportunity to do all this fun hacking is closing.
You think so?
Again,
I don't know, man. I think it's just gonna move, bro. Like, I think the fun hacking stuff is just gonna move to AI and other kind of things that you can still abuse, you know what I mean? Because inherently it's all built by people, right? And people are inherently stupid, man. Like, that's just basically it. They're gonna implement something that shouldn't be implemented.
I've been saying for 30 years, that's it. This is the last year we can play. But actually, no.
Yeah, it still continues, man. Like, we're still gainfully employed. So yeah, good times for that. But like, let's talk about telco security, right? I mean, you started TSTF in 2002. Since then, right, like, has the telco security landscape changed much? Are people still abusing SS7, for example? As in, like, is that still a problem?
Well, the telco security has changed really vastly in the last 2 decades, because they started from a model, that closed garden model where they said, well, this is our network, nobody can get in, so we don't really have to worry about our internal stuff. It's safe. And at first that was an adequate defense because of the complexity of telecom networks and all those obscure proprietary protocols. It sort of kept the average hackers at bay because they didn't have the technical sophistication to navigate those networks. But eventually that changed. First, they started interconnecting left, right, and center. Telecom networks, they were used initially just to make phone calls, and nowadays, who is using his, device to make a phone call? Almost
nonsense.
What's a phone call?
What's a phone call, man? It's a modem, man. That's it.
Yeah. So you're having those networks that are massively interconnected with each other and with service providers and with all sorts of external entities to their network, so that massively increased the security perimeters, attack surface. And people started realizing two things about telcos. One, a telco is like a bank in the sense that there's lots of money inside. And two, a telco is a great source of information on people. You can track who they're calling, when, what messages they sent, what is the content of those messages, all their private details, their payment history. I mean, it's a huge information mine for people who are into that information gathering about people. We live with our phones. So those two factors, the fact that the attack surface has massively increased and people realize the financial and intelligence value of those networks mean they were under a lot of attacks. And you were talking about SS7, and this is still very, very much ongoing because it's a protocol that cannot really be fixed because some vulnerabilities have been exposed for quite some time, including some very practical implication. I'm thinking about the presentation that Carsten made at the CCC, for example, that were very impactful and had a lot of, inspired a lot of people, including Positive Technologies to further that industry. And then there was the private players that say, oh, well, I can make a business out of that. I know there's a couple of Israeli companies that started marketing that as a service. Then some US companies as well, and they started mixing that with the ad tech industry, You know that your phone has an advertising ID, right?
Yeah.
That advertising ID is tracked all over the place by multiple techniques, right? Either some developers are inserting SDK in your software that, sends all sorts of data outside, or the advertiser are gathering that data to make a so-called anonymous profiling on you, anonymous in the sense that it doesn't contain any information that identifies you, but that's actually ludicrous because if I know that advertising ID is sleeping every day in the same place and going every day to the same workplace, it's not that difficult to de-anonymize him, right? So there's a whole cottage industry mixing, all this telco stuff with advertising information, and basically they're making that a business, selling where are people located and what are they doing. And it's becoming huge. So SS7 is used to track the location of people. Now you've got SS7 firewalls that are blocking that. And some operators are telling me that they're seeing who is attacking them. So in itself, this has intelligence value to know that, a nation state is interested in those numbers. So they actually find out who is attacking them. Then they return the wrong information to them so it has become a cat and mouse game, still very much ongoing. Operators are never really quick at patching their vulnerability, especially when it's at protocol level, and even more so when it's a protocol that cannot be fixed. So to answer your questions, those attacks still very much ongoing. The telcos are under hassle left, right, and center from nation states. I'm not sure they're winning. Thankfully, as I said, we're seeing they still are victim to some horrendous hacks. But the fact that the EDR industry, I think there's someone in the EDR company that say, hey, those telcos, they've got a lot of money. Let's do rounds. And they've suddenly we're seeing them everywhere in every telco, those EDRs detecting all sorts of stuff and having signatures they share with each other. So the game is changing. And as you said, maybe it's just a change in sophistication. Maybe AI hacking and all that is the future. But how does that happen? Without humans?
No, the humans are definitely going to be part of the problem, bro. Like, without humans, there won't be no hacking, man, because there won't be any vulns for us to find, right? It's always misconfiguration, some idiot that plugged something in that shouldn't have been plugged in, or configured some SS7 endpoint that shouldn't have been publicly accessible. But, talking about attackers, right? Like, how easy would you say, I'm just talking about historically, right? Like, we used to talk about misconfigured, publicly accessible SS7 endpoints in Bulgaria that you could then query, right? So that you can put in the MSIS-DN and find out where that phone is. How prevalent is that today? As in, has that problem been solved? Has the telcos already closed those doors so that you can't just query?
It's been solved to some extent because it's been publicly exposed, P1sec did scan all those vulnerable services and publish them. So a lot of telcos actually noticed their vulnerabilities and patched that. So it's not as prevalent as it used to be. No, not at all. However, they're still very much open to vulnerabilities between operators because they consider that, public exposure is bad and it's easily scanned, it's easily patched, but the interconnection between different operators cannot be locked out as easily. And so what we're seeing some sort of hostile entities that are officially registered, with the ITUs. They have their own, GTPs. They have their own addresses. They have their own SS7 point codes, etc. So they all look legit, but they actually just been set up for the purpose of, implementing attacks that are between operators as opposed to from the public side to operators. So they're still very much vulnerable to those attacks. However, they cannot be easily implemented by just some guy on the internet scanning stuff, right? You need to have access to one operator to compromise another. But it's,
a little bit more difficult. Just a little bit more difficult.
Bulgaria and all that.
So what's the future of telco security, man? I mean, from an attacker standpoint, right? Like, where should I be looking? I mean, we're talking about 5G and stuff. Like, if I was just starting to get into telco security and I wanted to look for some cool stuff to research, right? Which areas do you think I should be looking at?
Well, the 5G security is interesting because every time they change the generation, they try to improve security, but with various degrees of success. With 5G, they've chosen to open up the protocols a bit more, but the attack surface is huge because the complexity of all those IoT devices that are going to follow one standard of another, and the fact that people are going to deploy them at a huge pace in the next few years, mean that I think there's going to be some very interesting security research coming out of that field. I think if I was to get into telco security nowadays, this is probably where I would go, so research on at the protocol level on 5G, because there are actually many different kind of protocols. There are many ways to implement IoT and many ways to make those devices perform all those security functions. However, as you said, the human factor is always going to be there. People are going to want to deploy millions of those devices. We see it every day. The security level is not on par with that. So we can expect some very interesting research coming out of that field. I think it's happening already. We're seeing some deployments of 5G networks, and we're already seeing some security audits, some protocol weaknesses, the usual stuff that they do. They try to evolve a protocol that is not very secure. They create one that is not really more secure, and it takes another 3 years to change that, at least. So.
Same old, right? Like, nothing much has changed, man. Slap a new name on it, and then hopefully nobody notices that we didn't change anything.
No, it's true. And there are some of our partners that are really looking for ways to make that better, including, we need some people who can be trained to handle this kind of incidents. I'm sure that you've experienced that with the Cyber Week. The UAEs, they're looking for skills, they're looking for capabilities. They don't really know how to do that because they don't have enough local resources. So it's always a game of having a proper team that can defend your resources. And, the human factor is very important because you can't find those people easily. And it's one area that I think is very important, is to get people up to skill.
I don't know, man. I mean, if you think about, talking about the skill gap that exists, right? From the time that you were with TSTF, then now you're with Telecom Intelligence, right? TICS, right? In terms of the skills, where do you even begin to find the type of people that would be the right fit to do telco security? Because it's radio, there's lots of various different technologies that are involved with it. That the barrier to entry to kind of finding new guys that can move the needle is not that easy. So where would you begin? I mean, like, you know, for you guys, as in, where do you guys hire your folks from, as in your researchers to join your team?
Right, it's a very difficult problem because, and for two reasons. First, there's a skill level that's involved, and second, you know, because we work with, you know, telco, they are considered a national security or national critical infrastructure, so we can't, you know, send any young guys and say, oh, why don't you hack that network and let us know about it? There's a trust that is involved. So, it sounds silly, but it's easier to find skilled guys than it is to find trustworthy guys. And so we like to get people and train them up in telco security. You know, they come from the security, the pen testing, red teaming angle. They mostly have a focus on, you know, traditional infrastructure like Windows, Unix, etc. And so we take them into our team and we grow them. We train them up to understand all that telco stuff, which they usually find fascinating. So I think the new generation is the future of that industry. We're very much looking to, you know, get new blood in and train them into handling those complex networks. And of course, all that situation at the moment makes that difficult because we can't travel to our clients. We can't travel to meet potential people to recruit. It's made the whole thing a bit more difficult. I mean, we were used to work remotely with our clients before, but you still need to meet them from time to time. And, you know, this is dragging on for too long now.
So how you guys have been handling it? I mean, like, since COVID started until now, right? I mean, I'm guessing telco security audits can't be done across the internet, right? Or maybe they can, I'm not sure.
Well, we were doing that before, you know, once we made a deal with an operator, we set up a VPN and we have procedures with them to authorize connection, etc. So that allow us to work like if we were connected locally. I mean, we've been doing that for years before the COVID hit.
Right.
So for us, it was second nature. The good thing about that COVID scare is that now everybody understands remote work. We don't have to lobby for that, or we don't have to face management scrutiny or, who they are going to connect to our network from another country. Now everybody does that. So at least that's one good thing. Now remote work is totally accepted by everyone, right?
That's awesome. Okay, bro, I think we're down to 2 minutes. You're going to be joining us in Cyber Week, right? I think in November you're going to be making a trip over to Abu Dhabi.
I'm definitely going there. I mean, there's the expo is going on over there. Cyber Week it's a hybrid model, right? So There will be some real stuff happening, some real human beings that I can meet.
Fingers crossed, brother. We will be there, man. We'll be there in person. Hopefully you can join us, man.
I'd really like to go, and something that really interests me from that Cyber Week is, you know, finding the next cyber warriors that can help, you know, defend critical infrastructure. I think it's an important mission of that conference, and I hope, you know, we can be more involved with that effort. So
let's do a telco hacking contest, bro. Let's think about a telco hacking contest. We'll get Du or Etisalat or one of those fellas to open an SS7 and we'll like do a bug bounty on that, man. Like let's invite people in, man. Why not?
This is the way to go, you know. I mean, it's like those CTFs, you know, you find some really nice talent, but once you've identified them, you need to do something with them. And I think there's a lot to do there. So let's talk about it soon, bro.
Sounds good, brother. Hey, thanks so much for joining us, man. Like, I wish you could be here in person, but hopefully in November we can chill out, we can have a beer in person, and we can, like, you know.
Oh, yeah. Oh,
do
definitely.
Stuff again.
And hopefully next year it's the whole shebang, Amsterdam, Singapore, KL, Dubai, whatever.
Man, fingers crossed, bro. I mean, we've been locked in for so long that I've forgotten, like, you know, what it's like to fly. You know, I'm like, what's it like to go through airport security? It seems like such a foreign concept now, you know?
Yeah, well, I've been doing it a few times and I can tell you it's not fun.
Oh, shit.
25 COVID tests so far.
Oh man. Hey, so just a quick question. I got 30 seconds, right? Like, so for COVID testing, right? I'm a chicken shit, bro. Like, I'm so scared of the COVID testing. How uncomfortable is it? Scale to 1 to 10.
You've
10
never
being
done
that you never, no, I never done one.
Really?
10 being that you never want to do it again in your life. 1 being like, yeah, bring it on, it's like going to Amsterdam.
Well, you see, it depends on who administers the test, and that's why sometimes I'm just screaming at them and say, hey, why? Usually it doesn't hurt, and now I'm going to be in pain for 2 days because you just stuffed that stick up my
Damn
nose.
it.
But every time I'm thinking, we're in 2021, why do we need to put cotton sticks up someone's nose to detect something? Man, what technology is that?
Exactly, man. Like, I've been like, what is this, like, ancient aliens technology that we're using, man? Like, don't we have something better?
Well, they do have the home kits where you can just spit into it.
Yeah, I've got that, but apparently they don't recognize that.
Yeah,
So.
they have those kits, but they don't recognize them for travel, so... Oh,
Frustrating.
very, very. Okay, next year.
Next year, man. You take care, brother. We'll hopefully see you in November at Cyber Week. If not, we'll definitely see you next year in Amsterdam, yeah?
Alright, well, thank you for the opportunity to talk to you guys. I'm not sure it was interesting, but hey.
It was always interesting, man. Nice to catch up, brother. Take care, bro. See you soon.
Bye.
Ciao.
Okay, hello to the whole team, of course, and see you guys very soon.
Likewise. See you, man.